Hey folks, welcome back. My name is Krishna. If you're new to the channel, welcome. In this video, we're going to take a look at how you can create interesting landscapes and environments, or anything for that matter, when you start with shape and then you transform that shape into something that has structure, something like this. So this technique is a very powerful ideation tool that allows you to kind of go beyond what you would normally do if you were just presented with a blank canvas. So let's get started. So I'm going to first of all make a brand new canvas, and I will switch to the lasso tool and I'll pick a red color. And the goal here is I'm going to use this lasso tool to create selections. I'm going to add to those selections using the Shift key and subtract from the selections using the Option or the Alt key. So if I were to just create something like this, and hold down the Shift key, and then use the Option key, I'm just going to alternate to where I create something that looks a little bit interesting or random. So I'll start off with something like this. I've created this unusual shape. I'll fill that in with Option backspace or Alt backspace, and I have this really interesting structure. Now, never seen this before. This is just a completely random assortment, me talking as I'm working through this. So I'll drop the opacity, and I'll pick a darker red value, and I'll use one of my brushes. I'm going to use my octagon brush, and it really doesn't matter what brush you're using here, but I like to make my own brushes. If you're interested in some of the brushes that I use, check out the link in the description for this video so you can take a look at some of the brushes that are available in my brush pack. So we're going to start off with just looking at the overall structure here, and I'm trying to convert shapes into form. So for example, I've got this structure up here. It looks like it's kind of protruding, which looks very interesting. Let me make the brush just a little bit bigger. And I'm always going to be thinking about how do I convey overlap. So I've got this structure. It looks like a sword, but I don't want it to be a sword. I'm just going to draw this in. And then there's a few other pieces here. To achieve a steady hand when you're drawing long lines, you want to use your entire arm and not your wrist. And I'll just add this piece here. And the other thing too is you don't have to draw exactly what's on the shape here. This is just a guide. So now that I've got this, and I'm going to leave these two elements off. They're not really adding anything to me. So I've got a structure that looks something like this. So how do I now take that and make it look better? How do I make it look more interesting? Well, I can now start to add other structures. Let me just go ahead and add some rocks. And then I can add some bushes or vegetation. And this part right here might be ensconced in dark values. I'll draw some other weeds and other things like that over here. So we're starting to see how this shape is now turning into something that has some structural qualities to it, right? Drawing some ridges. Now we've got a rock. Maybe there's, some kind of a footpath. I really don't know, because this is just me kind of improvising on the fly. So we've got a footpath here. This, we can come back in, add some contours. Contours help define the form and volume of whatever structure it is that you're creating. So this now starts to give it a little bit more dimension. Okay, so now I've got that. These rocks might be covered in some kind of a shadow. So I'll fill that in. And shadows also are a great tool for creating depth. Got a few blades of grass here. And then we'll maybe got two protuberances here. That's your $5 word for today. And I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do with that just yet, but let me cut out a certain part of this and just use some volumetric shapes. We'll have two cylinders here. Maybe this is part of some mechanical structure. Some man-made object that is just maybe abandoned because it has more straight edges, which is why I'm kind of making that inference here. And I don't always have to stick with this point. I might chop that and add more elements. There might be some weeds growing around it. And there might be some support beams that are also behind it. So the more I look at this could also have some kind of a canopy. Oh, forgot to close a gap. There we go. And maybe this canopy kind of extends over here, and this could be made out of some type of, looks kind of like a mushroom type shape. And again, the idea is to let your imagination run wild. There's no wrong answer, really. It's just about having fun with it. Maybe I'll add some shades underneath here. And again, you can always erase what you don't want, and you can make it something of your own. The idea is just to have an open mind about what you're creating here. I'm not really worried about the result. I'm just having fun with it. So I've got this, whatever this mechanical structure is here, sitting on top of this rocky terrain. We can always add additional rocks. There might be some kind of a wheel. We'll give it a spoked wheel. This is some evidence that there's, somebody has been up here, either working on this or, maybe they're there and they're not there anymore. If we can show some evidence of life or some evidence that somebody has been here, that makes an environment look more interesting. Now, this piece right here is kind of interesting. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with that yet. And with this shape exploration, there's really so many different ways that one can solve the problem, as it were. It's like, you might see something differently than what I'm seeing here, and that's totally fine. So with this shape right here, I think what I'm going to do is let's create a little bit of overlap. This might be something that's just nestled in here. It has maybe some striations. Don't know what that is, but it looks like it's been plunged into this particular space. And you know what? I'll just extend this all the way down here. That just adds a little bit more visual interest. So maybe it's some kind of a defensive area here. Maybe there's some wires or other elements of technology that are also present. So I'm indicating that as follows. So now I've got all of these elements here, and they're in the midground, which means that, if I was to look at this scene, I would be maybe, 200 feet away from it or something. And I can start to think about how I can add background and foreground elements. So what I typically like to do at this point is I start to think about what I want in the foreground. And I can repeat that process using shapes, which I'm going to go ahead and do here. I'll just make some kind of an opening here. We'll just fill that in. So that right away gives us some kind of a foreground element. And with the lasso tool, I'll come back in and I will make selections holding down the Shift key, and I'll hit Command X or Control X to cut. And that leaves this idea that there's some form. We've got some contours that we've created here. And you might notice that there's a few areas where the midground is kind of bleeding in to the extreme foreground. Not a problem. I can just use the lasso tool on that particular layer and cut it. So now I've got foreground, I've got midground, and let's see what we can do for background. Well, background is going to be, it could be whatever I want it to be. But in this case, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have some trees and vegetation. So I will just draw several structures here of varying lengths. There might be some additional vegetation in the form of bushes. And when I'm drawing, I'm trying to ensure that I'm getting a variation of pressure. I'm also adding areas that are somewhat dark. And then what that does is that conveys this idea that maybe lighting is evident on certain parts of the structure. And I've got these tree trunks here. Let's go ahead and add some branches. And I'll repeat that on the opposite side here. You're just making your own little world, which I think is kind of cool. Maybe there's some evidence of more bushes back here. And you can vary the vegetation and plant life. There could be some bladed bushes that are there. So I've got now some background elements here. And what I'm going to do now is just to go ahead and make this a little bit more interesting and completely random. I'm going to look through some of my brushes here, and I'm going to pick something that has some type of texture to it. And I'm going to pick something that I probably wouldn't have picked, and I like to just put myself in really crazy situations where I have to find a way to work my way out of it. So this is a brush that I created. This is just a curved hatch brush. And what I'm going to do here is just make a few adjustments. I'm going to go ahead and make the opacity 100%. I'll increase the flow as well, make the brush a little bit small. I've got these really weird. I'm putting this on its own layer because I can clean this up a little bit later on. And I'll show you how I'm going to do that here. It's pretty cool. So it creates this really interesting texture. From that, what I can do is come back in with the lasso tool. Trim off certain parts. I don't like those, extra lines there. And the thing is, I've put these trees on the same layer as the bushes. So I've kind of painted myself into a corner here. Let me just quickly, I want to extract that onto its own layer. So I've had to start that over again from scratch, but not a problem. This is how creation goes. When you're making something, you are going to make mistakes, and that's fine. So I'll redraw that. Maybe put one more. So the issue there was that I had everything on one layer. So now I'm going to make a brand new layer. Instead of using that cross-hatching brush, because I really wasn't feeling that too well, let's see if I can find something else. Let's Use this elephant tears brush. There we go. I think that's looking a little bit more interesting. So I'm just tapping it like so. The advantage of putting things on their own layer is it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of like repositioning things, scaling things up, etc. So as we start to get to the top of the canopy of this tree, I'm going to make the dots smaller, and I'm going to, in contrast to the bottom here, which looks very dark, that kind of gives us an idea of some light not penetrating the bottom part of the canopy. It's amazing how the mind can kind of fill in information. Like, for example, those are just a series of dots organized in kind of a rounded shape. But then when you're looking at it in the context of seeing a branch, you put that together as a tree. Let me vary this up just in the interest of time, make a new layer. And these are going to be trees that are going to be more evergreen trees. So I'm just going to do one of these numbers again with the lasso tool. Just make one big selection, fill that in. And then I want those branches to show through. So what I can do now is drop the opacity of that layer, come back in, and just reveal where the branches should be, or the trunk, and then kind of cut into that. And then return that back to 100%. And this area looks a little bit too straight. And let me just go ahead and, I don't want this stick to kind of interfere with that. So I'll drop the opacity of that. Maybe I'll have this shape appear to be in front of the trees. So again, I'm going to use the lasso tool, cut that. So now I've got some depth. When you have things that are placed in front of or behind other objects, you create depth, which I think is really, really important to give this idea of space. I want to make this look a little bit more organic, so I'm going to add some other little dots and doodads to kind of give this a little bit more structure. So now I've got foreground, I've got midground, and I've got background. I can have an extreme background. So I can throw in some mountains. I can throw in some silhouetted forms, which I'll go ahead and do back here. Maybe there's some, trees that have some of their leaves blown off. We don't know. There's no wrong answers here. And we'll extend this mountain like so. And then I like to give a few elements of form, even on something that's this far in the background. I want it to look like it's got some dimension to it. And my line weight, as I start to draw background objects, is much, much thinner. So I'm not pressing down so hard on my stylus. So you can see here, I've got now foreground, midground, background. Maybe those mountains will somehow extend back here. I'll draw those ridges. What's really neat about this is you're creating your own little world. right? Didn't exist before, just kind of sprung forth, and I used shapes as a way of discovering something really new, which I think is pretty cool. So now I've got all of these elements put into place. And what I can do now is I can just convert everything to a ink value. I'm doing this just in the interest of time. I'm not re-inking the whole thing, but this is just to give you some idea of how I'm proceeding with this. So now I've got this environment that I've never created before, and it has foreground, midground, background, and certainly I could add other elements to it, more grass, some evidence of dirt. You always want to think about the type of material that you are trying to convey. Like, do stones read like stones? Does grass read like grass? What is the what is the who, what, where, and when, and why of the environment that you're creating? Like, what is this space? What is this device? What is this apparatus supposed to do? When someone is looking at all of this, that's the question that they're going to be thinking about to themselves. And I think some of the best environments that I've seen that other artists have created are those environments that ask those questions and, really kind of involves the viewer to kind of coming up with the story. Like, what is this thing all about? So you might have some evidence. For example, there could be some type of can or something like that. There might be some little telltale bits of evidence of maybe the person that was living in this particular location. What are they trying to do? Is this like some kind of a satellite that they're trying to use to communicate? Maybe there's evidence of some debris, some rocket debris, where we get the idea that they're kind of stranded on a planet and they're just using whatever technology they have at their disposal to create something that is going to help them maybe get off the planet. So your imagination is really what's going to drive you here. Again, there's no wrong answers. What's really neat about this approach is it gives you the ability to work unrestricted and just have some fun with it. So I hope you found this exercise to be of value. Give it a try when you get a chance. If you do find out that it's working for you, let me know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching the videos, and let me know what you'd like me to talk about next, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.